Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. It was a massive day today. The ACC media deal comes out, and they find out between ACC and ESPN, it's extended. But the circumstances and also the details surrounding the deal were pretty different than what people were really thinking about. Thinking about did ESPN look to go the other way? Were they looking to run away from the ACC? Basically just get rid of the deal, end it in 2027. That's not the case here today. We'll be talking about what exactly happened in the deal that they arranged, negotiations going on for months, multiple reports out that Clemson and Florida State are seeking a lower buyout in 2031 to whenever the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 TV contracts are up. We'll also talk about how this affects the ACC, the other schools and the institutions in the ACC, but also how this continually keeps them ahead of like another conference like the Big 12, putting ACC at third, but still trying to figure out ways to get towards the Big 12, towards the Big 10 and the SEC, or is it even possible? Also, scheduling agreements. We'll go over a number of different things, and also, too, how Notre Dame is involved in this entire complex situation. But first, guys, as you always know, the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Make sure you go over and see my friends over there. Tremendous people, incredible customer service. Make sure you go see them over Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. And, of course, Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson. Call them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Obviously, Brian is the best. I personally use him. Any type of questions that I have, I go directly to him. One, because he usually always has the answers, but if he doesn't, he points me in the right direction and does a lot of work in the community, but more importantly, takes care of the customer no matter what, and that is you. Again, give them a call at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Again, guys, we're going to be talking about today the ACC media rights deal extended to 2036. Obviously, we're going to pull up an article by David Hale. One, it's really, really good. It goes into a number of different topics, but also, too, talking about the ins and outs of the success initiatives that are involved with the ACC. What does this look like going forward? Also, too, a brand fund, which is going to be massive for brands. For instance, they talked about Miami, Clemson, Florida State, and really North Carolina are the four institutions that look like are the ones that are going to be really handling this brand fund in terms of being able to receive more money. But on top of that, the success initiatives, if you add those all together, they said you're really only a couple $1 million away between the Big Ten and the SEC. That's massive. Obviously not good for the other programs in the ACC, but one that solidifies at least some type of peace, at least till 2031 before things, I think, could potentially get mixed up. But obviously here, we'll go into sharing the screen here, obviously going into the article with David Hale. As you can see here, obviously, just immediately the headline immediately pops out at you. See if I should make it a little bit bigger here for you guys. 2036, ESPN exercised the option to televise the ACC sports through 2036. ESPN has agreed to pick up its option to continue to broadcast in the ACC sports through 2036, the network and conference announced Thursday. The agreement is a critical step toward securing stability for the conference. With the television deal settled, the ACC is now working toward a settlement with Clemson and Florida State that could end those schools' ongoing lawsuits against the conference. Again, no one really thought this kind of stuff would come out today, especially, too, thinking that this would probably go on for years potentially. A deal could potentially be struck, and they'll get more into that. Obviously, David and Andrea will go into it here. ESPN had until February 1st to pick up the option on a 20-year contract signed in 2016 that helped launch the ACC network. Had ESPN declined the partnership, would have ended after the 2027 season. A quote, obviously, from ESPN and the ACC: "We are pleased to extend our media rights agreement with the ACC through 2036, continuing our long-standing relationship," ESPN chairman Jimmy Pitaro said in a statement. "We remain committed to serving the ACC, its members, schools, student-athletes, and fans via comprehensive live coverage, storytelling, and broad exposures across unprecedented array of networks in platforms, including the ACC network. The ACC is a pillar of the ESPN leading commitment to college sports, and we are thrilled to continue the partnership over the next decade. Obviously, as you can imagine, before going any more, obviously, if you've been following the channel, if you haven't done so, subscribe and like this video. But we have been talking about how this has been coming. A lot of Big 12 people try to distort it and say it was not going to be coming. From everything that I was told, this was going to be expected today. It came through, but obviously the other details of what we weren't told, like Florida State and Clemson not going and really coming into a settlement, not continuing the lawsuits as they'll go on into more here, but also, too, how Notre Dame's involved in this, and we're going to get into that here. After ESPN agreed to pick up the option, a decision the ACC Board of Directors voted to approve Wednesday, sources said the conference is working hard on additional value adds, which could include creating more marquee matchups in football and men's basketball to maximize the content on the networks that would help pave the way towards new revenue distribution model and a settlement with Clemson and Florida State. A lot like in this way, it's a lot like what the Big Ten and the SEC were trying to do in terms of creating those marquee matchups, working in different types of scheduling in terms of different viewpoints, but also, too, prime time scheduling. Obviously, they talked about potentially it'll go through here Friday and Thursday nights on TV matchups, but also to the most valuable TV viewership windows. That's massive. If you're the only one there on a Thursday or a Friday night, or especially during those time periods where you're the only one that's in prime time, it's very simple. That means more money for the conference. And the conference continually year over year has really expanded and really grown to a certain point where they had over $700 million in revenue between the ACC and all of its members last year, and that's supposed to continue to grow as it comes out this year. It's going to be interesting to see. But here, multiple athletic directors told ESPN this could also involve using the ACC's relationship with Notre Dame to strategically create more games against the conference top-tier teams. Earlier this month, Notre Dame and athletic director Pete Beguia said he was open to playing more games against Clemson in the future. Notre Dame currently plays 5 to 6 regular season football games against the ACC annually and is a member of the ACC in all other sports. Again, a great relationship that Pitt has. With the ACC has with obviously teams like Pitt, but also every other team in the ACC. This one, however, obviously Pitt's faced obviously in my neck of the woods. We usually face Notre Dame every 3 or 4 years. You go back and forth between here and Pittsburgh. Well, obviously, we'll face them here in Pittsburgh this year. Next year, we'll face them in South Bend again. But obviously, adding more games onto the schedule with teams like Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina. Now that North Carolina has Bill Belichick, which is a whole nother factor of eyeballs coming into the ACC. But we'll discuss that even more. But obviously, negotiations surrounding the option ran into conjunction with discussions between the ACC and Clemson and Florida State on a new revenue distribution model aimed at alleviating the school's biggest concerns over financial disparities with peers in the Big Ten and SEC, both of which have more generous TV contracts signed over the past 2 years. Under the proposed plan, a percentage of the ACC's television revenue would be included into a brand fund. That money would then be distributed to schools that annually generate the most revenue for the conference in football, men's and women's basketball, with Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina likely at the top of the pyramid, sources told ESPN. Should the agreement be finalized, something sources said it is not imminent, but was closely tied to the ESPN option, Clemson and Florida State would be expected to drop their lawsuits. That's a massive factor going forward. One of the reasons why ESPN extended. These guys are going to drop it based on the negotiations that have been going on for months. And if you've seen on here, if you've been following the channel, we've been talking about this. People keep asking me, why is ESPN waiting? Why is the ACC waiting? They're not going to extend it. I heard from all the Big 12 people, Florida State people. I told you from numerous outlets, the sources that were telling us they were negotiating for how many months, and this is what's led to today. We appreciate the ongoing partnership with ESPN and their enduring commitment that further solidifies the ACC as a premier league in all facets, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips said in a statement. The extension showcases the importance of our long-standing relationship, and I want to personally thank the entire ESPN team for their leadership and dedication to the collective future. Clemson had been cautious in legal its lawsuit was not to move or to leave the ACC, but rather determine the cost of doing so. Though Florida State has been more vocal in its desire to test the waters, athletic director Michael Alford has maintained that the Seminoles never declared their intention to leave the ACC and only wanted to explore their options. Whether either school would have landing spots in the aftermath of a departure remained a point of conjuncture. And again, we talked about that conjuncture where they didn't know where they were going. The Big Ten, the SEC really came out and said, hey, we really don't want them. ESPN was really pushing back to we're not letting them go to the SEC. Fox and NBC certainly had a little bit of dabbling going on there. They wanted to talk about it. But Florida State really started to tarnish the reputation on the street because they were attacking teams within the conference, but also attacking the conference. Since early 2000, Florida State has been a school where they've really caused uproar and discussion. Brett McMurphy even reported back early, about 3 or 4 months ago, talking about how Florida State has really ruined their reputation by going after the conference. And presidents and athletic directors in the Big Ten and SEC said, do we want to potentially deal with a school like this to where maybe they're not getting as much money or they're not doing enough? That potentially could be an issue. Well, I should bring that back up here. I had a little bit of an issue there. I think they're updating, actually. It says here they're updating the article, which is pretty interesting in itself. Let me see here. We'll bring it back up here. Share screen. ESPN. All right, let's go down through here again and really get to the meat and potatoes here. It said they updated this article, so this should be towards the bottom here. All right, here, back to where we were. Negotiations surrounding the option. Still updating there. It says negotiations surrounding the option ran in conjunction with discussions between the ACC and Clemson and Florida State on a new revenue distribution model aimed at alleviating the school's biggest concerns. And we talked about that. The brand fund. Should that agreement be finalized? Here we go. We went over that. Clemson has been cautious. We went over that. Oh, yeah, here we go. ACC sources suggested a vote to support the new revenue distribution plan may not be unanimous, but one conference administrator said a cut in distribution would likely be worthwhile if it meant stability in the coming years as college athletics works its way through a volatile series of existential shifts and its amateurism model. Multiple administrators who spoke with ESPN noted the severe impact the collapse of the Pac-12 had on Oregon State and Washington State. As you can imagine, Oregon State or Washington State are in a massive issue right now, what they're going through. And that continues to be an issue. But obviously, they observably diminished the values of those programs had helped spark interest in negotiating a settlement. Nobody wants to go out there and go into limbo in terms of independence. You don't want to go into certain things like that because it could only hurt you, especially if you don't find a school. That would be a massive, massive problem. The ACC, and this is where it gets really, really crazy here. The ACC success initiatives, which went into place this year, provide additional revenue to the schools that play in the postseason. The brand initiatives would also be accessible to any ACC school though the biggest names would be able to have a clear leg up. Specific metrics have not been finalized. Between the brands and success initiatives, it is expected that the ACC schools that maximize both revenue streams can close the gap with the Big Ten and SEC schools as to a little as a few $1 million annually. That's crazy to think about. As far back as February 23rd, 2023, Florida State's Alford started pushing for ACC television money to be distributed. He talked about the 15%. But it says here at the bottom, Clemson and Florida State have argued that the ACC television contract, and this is where it got updated. They're still trying to update it. That's why I'm keeping this up right now. This is pretty crazy. Clemson and Florida State have argued the ACC television contract, which earns the conference about half of what the Big Ten receives from Fox, puts the schools at a significant financial disadvantage compared to their rivals in the SEC and the Big Ten, making it impossible to consistently compete for national championships. As part of the settlement, Clemson and Florida State are asking the ACC to agree to reduce the penalties for exiting the grant of rights after 2031 when the TV contracts for the Big Ten and SEC and Big 12 are set to expire. I mean, that's massive news in itself, guys, right there. So obviously, They're trying to look down the road to say in 2031, potentially they could leave the conference. Now, obviously, they still have to find a place, anything like that. So I think when you look at this overall, from 2025, here we are in 2025, to the end of 2031, the 2031 season through there, the ACC is pretty clearly safe. I mean, it's pretty much locked into this point. And it's something we have been talking about for numerous times on this channel. They're going to be safe. They weren't going to go anywhere. There wasn't enough interest. Florida State really ruining their reputation out there with other conference presidents, conference ADs, the overall commissioners. We talked about numerous times how sources told us the way they're bashing the conference is only making it look worse to other conferences because they said, hey, we're making this much money already. Why do we need to add Florida State or Clemson? Why do we need to do that? The SEC has certainly had their eyes on a team like North Carolina because it's a new volume, new major ad in terms of new locations, new viewership. Obviously, Bill Belichick going there obviously brings even more eyeballs, but that's only going to even help the ACC even more. How does this hurt the Big 12? Well, you saw the whole Big 12, the whole debacle, especially two online today, them freaking out because they were trying to create a narrative to where they were going to add ACC schools. It was going to collapse. It would never succeed. It was not going to be there till 2031. Well, here we are today. It's pretty clear that's going to be there to at least 2031. Beyond 2031, I think, is where the questions really rely. That's where you start to have those discussions on potentially if they go to a negotiation and a settlement to where it drops down 10, 20, 30% in terms of an exit fee. Because right now, you look at the exit fee to leave the ACC right now, the attorneys came out and said it's roughly $700 million to leave the ACC right now. And the way that college athletics is going because of revenue sharing, new $20 to $25 million a year now added into athletic departments, they can't do it. $700 million in general is too hard. Heck, Ohio State on 3 reported. Ohio State just won a national title. They were $35 million in the red in terms of a deficit. Adding that type of debt, $700 million, even down to $300 million would be way too much. So you look over into 2031, what does it look like bringing that down, bringing a settlement? Can Florida State and Clemson really negotiate that down? Potentially North Carolina, because the SEC was certainly interested in North Carolina. What does that look like? Can that possibly happen? So that's obviously where that's at as well. But one of the biggest things when you looked at here, I was taking notes, especially too from the conference that they talked about with David Hale and a number of my sources when I checked in with them, the scheduling tweaks are going to be crazy. When you look at scheduling, conference games being played on non-traditional viewing times and slots on a Friday and a Thursday nights. JJ, they would be able to have network availability, most valuable TV windows and time slots when they go into those different areas. That's a massive factor because when you're the only one on TV, you have those markets and people are watching the games, and you're the only one on TV, that's massive viewership. That's a lot more money. You're watching the jumps over and consistent at times. We haven't seen the 2023, 2024 numbers. We expect those to come out here within the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's going to be something to watch how it jumps. But in 2022 to 2023, the ACC generated over $700 million. That was over $150, $200 million more than the Big 12. That's going to be a massive upbringing. Now that the Clemson and Florida State pretty much have solidified that those lawsuits are coming to an end because the ESPN would not have extended this deal if it wasn't agreed upon that they were going to end it. This goes to show you that at least till 2031, it's extended till 2036, but 2031, I think, is the year that you have to watch for because it's certainly not, the ACC is certainly not safe till 2036, but also too, 2031 is when all the other TV agreements go to end. Does ESPN go into 2031 to say, hey, you know what? We'll negotiate a buyout to where we'll bring it down the grant of rights to 2031, and then we'll renegotiate with you guys when all those are going on. Also, too, the biggest thing about extending, also in there, as I talked to a source, they said that also ESPN wants a say, if not most of the say, of who the ACC potentially adds in expansion. They said they weren't big fans of Stanford and Cal coming into the conference. SMU has brought more money in terms of because their donors, their viewership climbed. Obviously, them making the college football playoff, that was a great ad. But overall, going forward, ESPN really wants to have most of the say when it comes into expansion outside the conference. And I think there are probably going to be some teams that are out there in terms of the Big 12 that you look at and you might say they might try to grab a couple teams. I know out there, obviously, when you look on the East Coast, what does it look like? Or down in Texas, people talked about Texas, or obviously Cincinnati, West Virginia, those teams up there, especially towards the Northeast. But down in Texas, you had a number of schools like Texas Tech, TCU, to really match up and go with a team exactly like SMU. And potentially, if you had to have a travel partner, do you potentially go after Utah? We saw that article about 6 months ago talking about how Utah was potentially able to get out of the Big 12 deal, which they still have a little bit of time left, potentially out of a Big 12 deal to where they leave the Big 12 and potentially go to the SEC or the Big 10. But also, too, now with the ACC still in the realm of keeping the conference till 2031, does Utah become a partner with Stanford and Cal in terms of joining the ACC? That's debatable. I think it's a long shot to happen, but it's something that's certainly on the table right now. Overall, guys, down below in the comment section, let me know what you think. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, share it with your friends. But down below, let me know your thoughts. What do you think about the ACC deal? What's your team that you're looking at? Obviously, imagine where we're going to go to into 2031. I think that the realignment stuff, because of the revenue sharing, could potentially be put on halt till 2031. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think about the ACC deal being done? Also, too, what do you think about the revenue distribution of what this looks like, success initiatives, also, too, a brand fund? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Well, guys, as always and forever, hail to Pitt, but also, too, hail to the ACC and hail to college football. I'll see you guys next time.